We should be live right about now, my sister.
Okay, I'm on your page.
We are.
Okay, I see you.
You see me?
I see you.
All right. Well, we're going to work it out, you see.
Yeah.
Somehow or other, we're going to work this out. Okay, now, I see it says Nita Reed joined.
Okay, I see you. I see you. We'll work it out. Yeah, you might be able to click on me. Yeah. Somehow or other, we're going to work it out. Okay, now, I see it says Nita Reed joined.
Yeah. And I see Reginald Newhart L joined. Ramses Mo Chan Rush joined. So we're working this out, family. Okay. Nita said hi.
Yeah. How can I?
Okay, we're going to work this out, family.
Yeah, I see you, but right now I don't know.
Islam to my brother Jermaine. Jermaine Farmer Bay. Jermaine.
Yeah.
Can,
Funny,
I can, you know, I can hear you, Nita. So if you wanted to ask the question, did you want to do it that way for now?
Yeah, for now until we figure it out.
Yes. So what was your first question, family? You know, I've been requested, you know, to do this live interview with Sister Benita Reed coming out of Germany. And so I said, hey, let me talk to my family in Germany and everyone else that's on her page. What is your program name? Nita's Universe?
Yes,
Oh.
Nita's Universe.
Okay, yes, no doubt. And there were
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry, you go ahead.
well, no, I'll follow you because you had the questions. This is really your show. I'm just dealing with it this way.
Yeah. My first question is, well, not actually a question, it's more like a topic, the education of children. That's something that I would like to talk to you about.
Nita wanted to talk about, in fact, they might be able to even hear you, you know, because I've got Sister Nita on the phone. And it was the question about educating children. And as I've gone through my educational career developing curriculum, for me, it is as applicable for children in Germany as it would be for children in Spain, as it would be for children in the United States. And I've always focused on the role of culture and the role that understanding who you are plays. And there has been studies done that shows that there is a difference, that there is an importance of understanding that, in fact, there was a study done in Chicago by a group out of Loyola University. And the bottom line was the fact that there's a distinct difference between self-esteem and cultural identity. And basically what that means is, for instance, I'm a teacher and I have children. I have 30 children in my class. There are 2 children that come in with a very strong sense of self-esteem. I can tell that no matter what happens in that classroom, those children are going to be able to do well academically, and they're emotionally stable. However, there are 28 children in the class that don't necessarily have that level of self-esteem, and they are not necessarily achieving at high levels academically, and in many ways the behavior and some other things are not really there. The study showed they took a 7th and 8th grade group of children, and they had their test group, and then they had the other children. And what they found was that when cultural education was introduced into the classroom, these were African American students in Chicago, predominantly African American. And what they found, my sister Nita, was that the children that had self-esteem continued to do very well. They were introduced to their culture, African culture. They were introduced to African American history and culture, and they did very well. However, in the other group, the 28 children, many of those students began to do very well once cultural identity was introduced to them. Whereas in the other classrooms, you had children that had self-esteem, and you had children that did not necessarily have self-esteem, where those children did not do as well. So what the findings showed, this was recorded in the Journal of Child Psychology, what they found was that the children that were introduced to cultural education were able to not only achieve academically, but they also, their emotional stability, their conduct, their behavior, the physical appearance, the way in which they carried themselves changed also. So it showed that cultural identity plays a very important role. Now, along with that, the study also found that when children have teachers that look like them, their performance improves. Not just that, they found that when African American males were in the classroom, the young African American male students began to conduct themselves in a different manner. And that is why I say that we have to teach our own children.
Yeah.
And that's a study. And the study was done. I've studied the study, but not just that. In my 31 years of education here in New York City, in the Bronx in particular, I know this to be true. Not just that, but because of my exposure to the great scholar, Dr. John Henry Clark, I am a product of what happens when you know your culture and history. And so it becomes important to understand that. Sister Nita?
Okay, and my bad.
I'll follow your lead.
Okay, what is what is its impact on success?
What's the impact on success? The impact is that no matter what you do in life, whatever field you go into, when you bring your culture with you, who you are and understanding who you are plays a very important role. Now, I'm not quite sure how it is in Germany as it relates to the educational system. And I'm not sure in many ways how it is in many other parts of the world. I know how it is in the United States, and I specifically know how it is in New York because I was there. The system that is in place, that is in power, does not want children of African American history. And the reason why I separate African and African American for now is because looking at the work of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, I know for a fact that I am as much a part of the African community in Germany as I am any place else in the world. I just happen to be an African in America.
Yeah.
So that I know that this works wherever we find ourselves. I have worked with children of many different backgrounds from various parts of the Caribbean. In South Central Bronx, where I went through the ladder, I've taught every grade. And as I've been impacted by students from Puerto Rico or from the República Dominicana or from Cuba or from Jamaica or from Haiti or Dominica, students from Ghana, from Nigeria, Guinea-Bissau. See, in South Bronx, we have a phenomenal blending of so many different cultures from Africa that I had a chance to observe up close how we are when we interact with each other and what the role of understanding your history and your culture plays.
Right.
Now, realistically, Sister Nita, because they're not going to teach our children their history and culture, what I've developed is my own way of teaching our children and culture. I don't have time for anyone to get an epiphany moment and say, oh, I want to educate those young African children. I don't have time to wait for somebody to do that. Because quite frankly, I don't think it's going to happen in this lifetime. So in this lifetime, my lifetime has been dedicated to developing a curriculum and going into communities and demonstrating how we can teach our children, whether it's in London or whether it's in Amsterdam, Holland, where I visited. I bring this culture with me and I adapt it to the environment. For instance, in Germany, there's a phenomenal culture on Blacks in Germany. I mean, I've got material on Blacks in Germany. In fact, anyone who really wants to study World War II properly would have to understand that long before people of Jewish faith were murdered through mayhem, the first peoples that were killed by Hitler were Black people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Remember World War I. In World War I, when Germany was defeated, they were very upset as a country. But what had happened in Europe because of World War I was that Africans from all around the world, if you were a colony of England, then Jamaicans, Bajans from Barbados, Trinidad, Africans from Ghana, from Kenya, the English-speaking African world, the French world, whether it was Haiti, St. Lucia, or whether it was one of the French-speaking countries of Africa, here in the United States, African Americans went to fight in World War I. When they got to Europe, particularly, let's focus on Germany, many Africans around the world from the Caribbean or from South or Central America or from America were treated better in Germany than they were in the United States or in the Caribbean where they came from.
Wow. Okay, that's something I really never knew. And that's something they never teach in school. I mean,
no.
Never.
So Africans remained in Europe. And this lieutenant in the German army, who had been impacted by the mysticism of Africa, Egypt in particular, took a symbol that a woman, Helene Blavatsky, Russian woman from Russia, went to Tibet to study Buddhism. Buddhism, of course, originating in Africa. It had symbols. She brought these symbols back to Europe. And this young lieutenant took one of the symbols and emblazoned it on the flags, emblazoned it on the uniforms of the military. He became leader of Germany. And I'm speaking of the swastika. The swastika is a sacred symbol in Buddhism. You can also find that symbol in Ghana. You can find it in Nigeria. It's the ancient symbol for balance and harmony in the universe. It's the symbol of an elliptical galaxy. If you curve the symbol, if you curve a swastika, what you have is the yin and the yang that comes out of Asia. This was a sacred symbol that a bad person did bad things with. And because he was so upset that Europe, particularly Germany, had been impacted by Africans, he created a new war against these people of African descent. So the first persons murdered in Germany were the Black Germans. And the reason why he killed the Germans were because the reason why he had the people of Jewish faith killed was not so much because of their religion, but because he saw them as being mixed with blacks. Because he knew ancient history, and he knew that the first true, who we call Jewish, but they weren't Jewish at the time. The word we're dealing with is Haibri, which is where we get the word Hebrew from. The first Hebrews were black. They were Africans.
Yep.
And so that's why he attacked the Jews of Europe, because they were black, or he considered them mixed with black, or Semitic, or Semi. Because first of all, you cannot be Semitic. Semi means mixture. And that's the language. Whenever you're dealing with the word Semitic, you're dealing with a language. You're not dealing with a people. People aren't Semitic. The language is Semitic because the base of the language is African, that has been touched by Indo-European languages, that then becomes the language that we speak. But the people are known as Haibri, H-A apostrophe I-B-R-I, Haibri. We also have the derivative of the Jabiri, so that, or Habiru. So we're dealing with information and understanding of who we are as a people. And so they're not going to teach our history to us.
No.
But we don't need them to, because we have to do this ourselves anyway because of what research shows us.
What do you think is the reason why they don't teach us our history?
Because if we ever knew who we were, we would be free. If we understood who we were and what we've done, if we understood what we have brought to the world arena as it relates to education and information, we would restructure everything. Just like we do now. Everything we touch, we change. So that it shouldn't be surprising to us, family, that we are the people that we are, that we have achieved what we have. We bring a flavor to the world that is so powerful and so real that we change. We change language. We change the way in which clothing, we change music, we change art, just by our nature. And if I were them, knowing them being those who wish to oppress other people, if I were them, if I were an oppressor thinking the way I know they think, I would do the same thing. Why would I give you the keys to your freedom when I'm trying to oppress you? I would have to be out of my mind. So it's not surprising. It's up to us to do this. Nobody else.
Yeah, I have to admit, it's like, when I was trying to get some knowledge, or also watching some videos on YouTube, it's like, for me, it started off with watching videos from people who don't look like me. And then, I don't know how, it kind of shifted, and I started watching videos from people who look like me, and also videos from you. And it's just a different, it's a different, not only a different feeling, but I think the way our people teach is just a total different way.
Yeah.
It's just totally different.
And that is the bottom line that we have to, but you see, it's up to us to take on that responsibility. That becomes very important for me to understand, because on one level, while we speak of those who would wish to treat us inappropriately, while we talk about what people are not doing for us, I'm of the mindset, I grew up with the type of mindset that doesn't harp on what other people aren't doing for me. My question is, what am I doing for myself? Yeah. And that becomes the cornerstone to the work that I've done through the years. I don't depend on someone else to do for me what I should be doing for myself. And that's how I feel towards my people. Once I saw the system and I saw how the system worked, then I just adjusted my lifestyle according to what we need to do for ourselves. It's just simple like that. Unapologetically and unashamedly African, developing a program for African children. whether people like it or not, whether you embrace it or not. It's based on science. It's based on the ability that I can go back and research and show you where I got my information. I can show you pictures of Black Buddha in Vietnam. I can show you the statues that the great scholar Runoko Rashidi goes around the world and photographs who we really are as a people in China, in Japan. The Japanese people were formed when African Kushites brought South Koreans onto those islands in the ancient world. And those Kushites, Africans, and South Koreans going onto the island came in contact with a short-statured African people who were the first to inhabit the Japanese islands, known as the Ainu.
I have to write that down. I want to check this out.
There's a book titled "The African Presence in Early Asia." In fact, when you go to my website, you know, the study guide that you saw has a section that deals with the African presence in early Asia, where I have a list of the books and also the themes to study, because there's a way to study African history. You know, you just don't open up a book. Although you can, that's great. I'm not going to take that away. That's good. But what becomes important is the ability to understand that there's a way in which you need to study the history. What I need to do is just turn a light on real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, because it gets dark in New York real early. It's 20 minutes past 4 in the afternoon here in New York, and we just had that daylight savings time, so it gets dark real early up in here now. But you know, the idea is, as we move through this, the study guide takes you where you need to go to help you understand what needs to be understood. And it's just something that I encourage our people. We must do this for ourselves. That's the one thing that I say. If it is to be, it's up to me. It's just simple like that. We can spend our time complaining about all the things that people are doing to hurt us. I understand that. But if I were them, I would do the same thing, because I would be afraid of once you get power. That's why they forbid us from reading in the United States. That's why they give us an inferior educational system. Because if we understood who we were, where we've been, and what our capacity is, we would understand what we can do. So they want to keep you thinking that it's an achievement gap. It's not an achievement gap. It's an opportunity gap. And in education, that becomes very important to understand, because when they tell you that it's an achievement gap, they give you the impression that other cultures do better than us. They tell you that Europeans are more intelligent than African people. They'll tell you that Asians are more intelligent than African people. That's not true. That's not true. No culture is smarter than another culture simply because they belong to that culture. That's just not true. It's the opportunities that we give to our students that makes the difference. When you live in an affluent community and you can go into school with a laptop, that's very different from a community where children don't have laptops and have to depend on 12 computers in the school. That's not an achievement gap. That's an opportunity gap. If you gave every one of those young African children who may speak English or Spanish or French or Dutch or German, if you gave each and every one of them a laptop, if they had the money to be able to have a laptop, they would do just as good, in many cases better than, students of European and Asian descent.
Yep.
I know that for a fact. I'm not even saying that like I studied that. I know that for a fact, because I've been in the system and I understand what happens in our schools. So we have to know the difference between an achievement gap and an opportunity gap. When students have opportunities, many times they achieve.
Yeah. I think that's important. important to make that difference because a lot of people kind of miss that. You feel me?
Yeah, absolutely. And that becomes very important. Know the difference between an achievement gap and an opportunity gap. You give a child an opportunity, they will achieve. If you deny them opportunities, then there will be challenges. But even in that, Nita, I have seen students that can achieve even without opportunities because they can make their opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's very